The OSI Silver Fox is one of the strangest cars ever built, yet most people have never heard of it. It was designed by Officine Stampaghi Industriali, an Italian coach building company that was known for its short-lived but ambitious projects. The car was unveiled at the 1967 Turin Motor Show, where it stood out from everything else on display. Unlike the curvy Grand Tourers and boxy sedans of the time, the Silver Fox looked like something from the future. It had a twin boom design, resembling a catamaran, with the cockpit sitting in the middle. This was not just for looks. The design was meant to improve aerodynamics and stability, especially at high speeds. It was a racing prototype, aimed at setting records and competing in the Group B6 category. The Silver Fox was not OSI's first attempt at such an unusual design. The company had already experimented with the Bisiluro, or twin torpedo layout before, trying to make a car for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. That project did not go anywhere, but OSI did not give up. They worked on the Silver Fox, hoping it would change the game. Unfortunately, just like their previous attempt, this car never got to compete. OSI was facing financial difficulties, and the company shut down before they could see their vision through. The Silver Fox had a Renault Alpine engine, a small but efficient 1.0-liter four-cylinder unit. This engine was positioned inside the left boom, right behind the driver's seat, placed at an angle. The car's power might not sound impressive, but its entire design was about reducing drag and maximizing speed. The most interesting part of the car was its aerodynamic elements. It had 3 wing-shaped structures. The first was at the front, and it could be adjusted while the car was stationary. The second in the middle was movable while driving, allowing the driver to fine-tune the car's stability. The third was at the back, fixed in place but featuring aerodynamic brakes. The idea was to use these wings to control airflow and keep the car stable even at very high speeds. Despite its innovation, the Silver Fox never got the chance to prove itself on the track. OSI went out of business before the car could be properly tested in competition. After OSI shut down, the car ended up in private hands. It was displayed at the 1997 Retromobile Show in Paris and later at the 2013 Goodwood Festival of Speed. Today, it is part of the private collection of Paul-Émile Bessade, a French racing driver. The Silver Fox is a car that makes people stop and stare. It looks more like a spaceship than a race car. It is a reminder that the 1960s were a time when designers were willing to take risks. OSI may not have survived, but their ideas were bold. The Silver Fox remains one of the most unusual race cars ever built, even if it never got the chance to compete. It is a strange chapter in automotive history, one that almost feels like science fiction. The Pegaso Z-102 Cúpula is a car that many have never heard of, yet its history is filled with unexpected turns, political connections, and a design that was unlike anything else on the road. Built in Spain in 1952 by ANASA, a company better known for manufacturing trucks and buses, this car was a bold attempt at high-performance engineering. The mastermind behind it was Wilfredo Ricart, a former engineer at Alfa Romeo, who had a vision for Spain to produce some of the most advanced cars of the time. At first glance, the Pegaso Z-102 Cúpula stands out for its unusual shape. It was named Cupula, which means dome in Spanish because of its massive curved rear window that looked like a bubble. It was built on a Pegaso Z102B chassis, which itself was an impressive piece of engineering. Under the hood, it had a 2.8-liter V8 engine that produced 170 horsepower at 6,300 revolutions per minute. That might not seem like much today, but in the early 1950s, it was a serious amount of power. The car could reach a top speed of 225 kilometers per hour, or about 140 miles per hour. That made it one of the fastest cars of its time, and it was made even more impressive by the fact that it came from a country not known for sports cars. Pegaso was trying to challenge big names like Ferrari and Jaguar, but the Cupula was more than just a speed machine. Its design was futuristic, though not in a way that everyone found attractive. The rounded roofline, enormous wraparound rear glass, and unusual proportions made it stand out in car shows, but not always in a good way. Some thought it looked like something from a science fiction movie, while others were unsure what to make of it. Regardless, it was unlike anything else on the road. The Cupula made its first public appearance at the 1952 Paris Motor Show, and then was shown again in 1953 at the World Motor Sports Show in Madison Square Garden in New York City. After that, it took an unexpected turn when it was sold to Rafael Trujillo, the dictator of the Dominican Republic. Under Trujillo's ownership, the car became known as El Dominicano. Like its name, its fate was just as dramatic. After Trujillo was assassinated in 1961, the car passed through multiple owners and was eventually modified into a Spider, removing its most distinctive feature, the dome-like roof. For years, the Cupula drifted through different hands, undergoing various changes until finally it was restored to its original condition. Today, it sits in the Lumen Museum, one of the most prestigious automotive museums in the world, where visitors can see this strange yet fascinating piece of automotive history. The Pegaso Z-102 Cúpula is a reminder that the car industry has always been full of bold ideas, some successful and some not. It was fast, unusual, and had a past filled with political connections and modifications. It may not have changed the course of car history, but it remains an interesting footnote in the world of high-performance automobiles. And let's be honest, a car with a massive bubble window is always going to be a conversation starter, even if it is not for the reasons its creators intended. The Panther 6 is one of the strangest cars ever made. It had 6 wheels, a massive engine, and a list of luxury features that sounded more like a fantasy than reality. Built in 1977 by Panther Westwinds, a British company known for making unique and exotic cars, the Panther 6 was unlike anything else on the road. Only 2 were ever built, making it one of the rarest cars in history. The design of the Panther 6 was inspired by the 1976 Tyrrell P34 Formula One race car. That car had 4 small front wheels and 2 large rear wheels to improve grip and handling. Panther Westwinds thought this idea could work on a high-performance street car. The car measured 4,877 millimeters in length, 2,032 millimeters in width, and 1,219 millimeters in height. The wheelbase stretched 2,667 millimeters from the second front axle to the rear axle. It was built with a steel tubular frame covered with an aluminum body. The total weight was about 2,870 pounds. Under the rear of the car sat a monstrous 8.2-liter Cadillac V8 engine with twin turbochargers. It produced an estimated 600 horsepower, which was a huge number for the 1970s. The engine was connected to a 3-speed automatic transmission. Panther Westwinds claimed the car could go over 200 miles per hour, but no official test ever confirmed that. Still, it was fast for its time. The inside of the Panther 6 was just as unusual as its 6-wheel design. The company packed it with high-end features. It had electronic instruments, air conditioning, power-adjustable seats and windows, a detachable hardtop, and a soft convertible top. It also had a television on the dashboard and telephones built into the armrests. These features were incredibly rare in the 1970s. Today, cars have big screens and built-in communication systems, but back then, this was unheard of. One version of the Panther 6 had a 3-seat layout with a bench seat, while the other had 2 individual seats. Panther Westwinds built only 2 of these cars. The first one, a black right-hand drive model, had a 3-seat bench and a gear selector mounted on the steering column. It was first shown at the 1977 London Motor Show. Over the years, this car changed owners several times, and it was last seen in Saudi Arabia. The second car, a white left-hand drive version, had 2 separate seats and a center gear selector. It took longer to complete because Panther Westwinds ran into financial problems. In 1985, it was sold for 150,000 British pound. Like the first car, it passed through several hands over the years. Despite its unique design and powerful engine, the Panther 6 never went into full production. It was too expensive to build, and its unusual 6-wheeled setup made it difficult to sell. Today, the 2 surviving cars remain rare collector's items, representing a time when car companies were willing to take big risks. The Panther 6 might not have changed the industry, but it certainly made people stop and stare. The Marcos Mantis M70 is one of those cars that makes you wonder what the designers were thinking. It was a sports car with 4 seats, built by a small British company trying to take on giants like Jaguar and Lotus. It had a futuristic wedge shape, a fiberglass body, and an engine from the Triumph TR6. On paper, it seemed like a promising idea, but the reality was a different story. Marcos Engineering had already made a name for itself with lightweight sports cars, but in the late 1960s, the company wanted to expand. They needed a car that could appeal to a wider audience, something more practical but still sporty. The idea of a 4-seater Grand Tourer was born. The project started in July 1969, and by September 1970, the first Marcos Mantis M70 was ready. It was a rushed development, but they were eager to get it to market. The Mantis M70 had a fiberglass body mounted on a square-section steel tube frame. It was long and low, measuring 4.72 meters in length and just 1.17 meters in height. The design was striking, with a sharp wedge shape that was very much in style for the era. Inside, it had room for 4 adults, which was unusual for a sports car. There was even a decent amount of storage space, with a trunk capacity of 283 liters. It was a practical sports car, at least in theory. Under the hood, the Mantis M70 was powered by a 2.5-liter Triumph TR6 inline-6 engine, producing around 150 horsepower. It had a 4-speed manual gearbox, which was standard for the time. The car's lightweight construction helped its performance. The fiberglass body weighed just 250 pounds, making it much lighter than most steel-bodied cars. The suspension was a mix of double wishbones and coil springs at the front, with a live rear axle supported by trailing arms and coil springs at the back. Braking was handled by servo-assisted discs at the front and drum brakes at the rear. Despite its unique design, the Mantis M70 struggled in the market. It was priced at 2,550 British pounds, putting it in direct competition with cars like the Jaguar E-Type. That was a problem because the E-Type had a bigger engine, better brand recognition, and a more polished design. Marcos, on the other hand, was a small company with limited resources. To make matters worse, the company was dealing with financial problems, especially in the United States, where new safety regulations made it difficult to sell their cars. By 1972, Marcos went into liquidation, and production of the Mantis M70 stopped after just 32 units were built. Today, the Mantis M70 is a rare collector's item. Only a handful of them exist, and they are an interesting piece of automotive history. The name Mantis was later revived for other Marcos models, but the M70 remains a unique attempt at creating a 4-seater sports car. It was bold, unusual, and maybe a little ahead of its time, but it was also flawed. Sometimes, a good idea on paper does not translate into success on the road. The Marcos Mantis M70 is proof of that.